Go ahead. Yeah, throw some revs into it. Awesome.
I remember the day I got my 2004 SN-95 Mustang. I named her Red Betty, and 7 years later, the day I got her still feels like a week ago. I paid $4,400 for her after haggling $100 off the price with the used car dealer I was getting her from. I can't believe there was ever a time I was proud of that discount, but also, yeah, I absolutely can believe it. I paid for Betty in one shot for money I made off of one season of writing for a TV show on the Esquire network. Remember the Esquire network? Yeah, me neither. I didn't even have cable then, so I couldn't even watch the show. And it was mostly uncredited work too, beyond a vague associate producer credit that never got listed anywhere. But I didn't care because I got paid. And up to that point, it was the most money I'd ever seen at one time. And even then, after taxes, it only barely covered the cost of the car. But I felt lucky. For 7 years, I felt lucky. Even through all the problems, the ignition coils I've gone through, the spark plugs that have failed, the tires gone flat, the brakes that seem to need new pads more often than they should, the microscopic coolant leak I couldn't locate, the side control panels that pop out, these side mirrors that pretty much came rusted all to hell, and the blind spot mirrors I put in the wrong place because I was completely zoned out and not paying attention. Out of everything that's been fixed and fussed over time and again, I felt lucky. Because not everybody gets to own a car outright, even if it is just a V6, even if it is a model you've romanticized in your mind from childhood. Not everybody gets the chance. I mean, we're all just sort of wading our way through life, trying to figure out whether we're giving the money shot or taking it. And in all this chaos, even as it breaks my heart to come to this recognition about my Mustang, perhaps even about Mustangs in general, I can truly say, I think I'm done. I have to sell my Mustang. Not because I have to, but because I can't justify it anymore. It hurts to say so, but it's time. Ford Mustang SN-95, sponsored by the man who's the elephant in every room he walks into. Look, I can't say I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I bought this car. I knew that it would probably need a little more TLC than something like a Corolla or a Camry, and I did my best to provide it with the sort of regular maintenance any car that's nearly 20 years old would need. When I bought this Mustang, the rear defroster didn't work, which, understandably concerned Brian, and the car also needed a new fan, but other than that, she worked fine, and I got those elements fixed and moved on. And for a long time, it gave me no problems. I bought this at around 98,000 miles, and she's currently running at a hair over 153,000, which is wild because you would think I'd driven this harder, but I really haven't. And it's for a twofold reason. If you ever see the clown car convoy of Mustangs making their way into a car show, a tin can racket giving way to a sore-throated primal roar that trails into the ether like the tail end of a one-sided argument, then you know what kind of reputation these things have. And I have endeavored throughout my years of ownership to not steer into that cliché. Of course, how could I when I drive a V6? And trust me, I've heard from enough people that this isn't a real Mustang, but this was the Mustang I wanted. This was the Mustang I could find. This was the Mustang I could afford. In a perfect world, I'd have gone with a more powerful engine, but if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't know that I would have even trusted myself to be able to handle it all back then, and not end up making a fine pancake of myself somewhere off 422 westbound. I know a Mustang doesn't exist to be nursed. Even a V6. And yet that's more or less what I did. Which is not to say I never really pushed the engine, I've had my moments. I've had a lot of fun with it. But this is my daily, and to be completely direct, I'm not really a speed guy, and I'm not really a more power guy either. I'm just a guy, I guess. cruising down congested streets, listening to Wrestling Observer Radio as I'm overtaken by some kind of Jeep product, driven by a man in aviators with a taste for beer and benzos, whose two greatest loves are his ex-wife and turning off his body cam. I've just really never seen the need to push my Mustang, you know? I just enjoy the steady cruise. And the Essex V6 cruises with the best of them. It's smooth, even-handed acceleration with minimal fuss and handling that is reactive and rewarding in its simplicity. But sometimes the negatives outweigh the positives rather than accentuating them, which brings me to the second reason I haven't driven this as much as I probably should have. Simply put, after the initial honeymoon period of state inspections where I didn't pay anything because nothing was ever wrong, stuff started to go wrong. Some of it was my fault, of course. You know, I didn't swerve around the potholes in time. Or, you know, I did swerve but ended up jumping a curb or something crazy. Maybe I brake too hard or not hard enough. Maybe I didn't get enough alignments or took the scenic route too many times. I don't know. But over time, I started to get check engine lights every few months. This car was in and out of shops all the time, and it all started to add up. And not just in terms of money, but in terms of anxiety. Brakes, rotors, new radiator, water pump, fuel pump, cooling fan, alternator, all these things that, granted, like, they didn't all happen at one time, but were simply accumulations across 6 years of ownership. But it was wearing on me. And not just the big things either, but the little things too. This door, my driver's side door, has never had a catch on it. So obviously that's kind of obnoxious when I'm parking next to other cars and I have to manually hold the door just to control things in such a way that I don't hit the other car, but also so that I don't close the door on myself, you know? It's just a very obnoxious thing. Also, these come right out almost immediately.
Oh, this is new.
Yeah.
This is a new thing?
This, relatively, but not... Like a year and a half, 2 years ago, I want to say, this first started happening.
So we have one screw here that isn't screwing into anything. You have a nice big hole. What was holding this? And there probably was a tab there at some point. I got some shoe goo.
The passenger side panel does that too.
Bird.
Good times. So this right here is a problem that I've always been dealing with that I tried to resolve with needle and thread, and every time I would try to close this up...
You've been sitting on this?
Yes. Every time I would close...
Like my dad.
Every time I would close this up, it would come undone again. If I were smarter, I would have just gotten a seat cover or some other sort of... you know, back pad.
So you've been sewing it back together?
Yeah, essentially, I don't know if you can really call it sewing. As it was explained to me, I believe there is a very slight coolant leak that's sort of like a drip that, I mean, can't really get to without, you know, sort of taking things out. And so I just got to keep her topped up, and that's kind of what I've been doing. One thing I do like about this is the ease with which I can change my headlights, because they tend to go out when it gets cold. So
you've been going through headlight bulbs?
Yeah, only like 1 or 2 per season, or per.
You've been going through 2 headlight bulbs every year?
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you why. Right there, you
right
got a crack in it, moisture's getting in.
Let's see. But yeah, I just pop this out, then pop out the unit, and
yeah,
we'll pop that out too. But
right.
Yeah, it's all this stuff of just, you know, I'm kind of thankful for that. I'm thankful that the alternator was easy to change.
Oh yeah,
that's
right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll have to say it, like, there's nothing, that water pump looks new.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, not new, but like in the past year new.
Yeah, I mean, it looks clean.
Yeah.
Yeah, this V6 is the Ford Windstar minivan engine. And Essex V6, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They put it in anything that needed a V6. I mean, Ford did some nice things. An air cleaner that you don't need tools to change. That's right there. Nice dust coming off of it. I mean, these weren't aspirational engines. They weren't engines you were meant to love or anything. They're just a dirty V6 occasionally I saw like one person at like the Ford show at Maple Grove put a bunch of performance parts on this engine. It's like, these things are overhead valve. I don't even know that I am farting. I don't even think they're overhead cam. I mean, maybe they are, or are they still push valve or push rod? I think it's funny how big your power steering pump is compared to everything else. It's this huge chonker right there, your power steering pump.
Chonk.
Yeah. The crank pulley is spaced out so far because the engine's so tiny, relatively speaking, to the 4.6 modular. Nothing special about your AC compressor pump. Your AC has been working the entire time, right?
Yep.
That never, of all the things that have gone wrong, the AC has never quit.
Yeah, it's been one of the most dependable things about this car is the AC, which is funny because that wasn't the case when I first got it, because the electric fan was broken.
Oh, right.
So
yeah.
it was overheating all the time and like spitting out coolant everywhere. And so, yeah, once I got that replaced, everything was great, and I've been enjoying a nice, refreshing cool every summer. Although, granted, I drive with the windows down most times. I suppose a smarter man would have thrown in the towel sooner, but in that way that so many car guys can't quantify, I truly loved this car. I loved putting the windows down and turning up the stereo on my aftermarket head unit and loafing around my city, or picking up my nephew to go hang out somewhere, getting into our adventures, or using the car as a studio to film YouTube videos for a hobby that became something we could bond over. And my nephew came to love the car too. It took us to countless arcades, it took us to comic book conventions, it took us to rock quarries where we could set up a camera and have lightsaber duels. I mean, why wouldn't he love it? He took this picture the day after I got Betty, and when I told him I was thinking about letting her go, he asked me to take the same picture, but with him instead. He wants an SN-95 when he's old enough to have one, but I know it's probably not the right car for any young person because it wasn't exactly the right car for me, even if I came to it later in life than I would have liked to. I suppose this is where I get candid, and it's the type of thing that should scare me, that should make my anxiety seize up. But the past few months have created a realignment in my priorities, and so, in short, my mental health hasn't been all that great, and that's because it's never been all that great. So, my anxiety disorder was so severe growing up that I wasn't allowed to drive, because I was on such a high dosage of medication that it wasn't safe for me to do so. And for that reason, until I went through extensive treatment and got off of the medication I had been taking, I wasn't actually able to legally drive until my late 20s. I was going into the DMV to get a driver's license and waiting in line next to people 13 years younger than me. So there you have it, the basis of my imposter syndrome. But it's also the reason I started making RCR stories. Because I couldn't drive or wasn't allowed to, I felt shut out of something in which I'd developed an interest. So the only way to really participate in car culture was through interaction with automotive history. And in reading about those stories, I came to view certain figures as legends. And over time, I wanted to share those stories with people. So when RCR took off, that's what I did. And in that way, I felt like I had at least partially justified myself to viewers of RCR who maybe didn't like me all that much. Sure, half of every Monday script is me, and that's cool, but part of me just wanted something I could point to and say, hey, I have value, as an individual. Even as I recognize that this is something that I wouldn't be able to do alone, necessarily. That Brian and I do reinforce each other through contrast and similarity. That we're two halves of a whole, and that the whole is better for that cohesion. But mental health is weird, It robs you of your productivity to where you maybe feel like you're not producing at the level you used to, because all of your baggage is driving a wedge between your creativity and the goals you hope for that creativity to achieve. So the reason I'm mentioning all of this in context of selling Red Betty is because so much of why I got this car in the first place, and why I've stuck with it for longer than I probably should have, is all tied into my baggage, I guess. Not to take too deep of a dive, but my dad died when I was little, and I was raised by my mother, my grandmother, and my father's best friend, a gay hairdresser who loved me like one of his own. I mentioned this stuff in the intro to the Lexus LS400 review, but that feels like a lifetime ago.
LS400, stay fly. I was raised by 2 women and a gay guy. So a Lexus is a car that I can stay by. Wrote as thick as toilet paper when it say ply. What?
I don't think I could have asked for a better upbringing, but I suppose the absence of my dad created this void I've tried to fill, and I think cars might have been one aspect of trying to connect. It's something I didn't even recognize until I read a prompt from one of our podcast listeners. Is giving up the Mustang part of you feeling like growing up more? I'm holding on to a sports car, and as I get older, I look at it more as a symbol of hanging on to my youth. Yes and no, in the sense that growing up, I wanted a Mustang because it was the car that my mother and father had their first date in. So there was this romanticized notion of a Mustang, all the more amplified by the fact that my father died young. And so I didn't get to really know him. And so it's almost like communing with my father through a car. I never thought of it that way. That like I'm replacing the lack of a father with a car. That's weird, right? Okay. Well, that's something to talk to about the therapist, or talk about with the therapist. Of course, I don't want my life to be defined by my father's absence, but I will say that there are moments where I felt like I don't know how to be a man in this. I don't know how to be a man. I don't even really know what that means. I guess I'm just sort of figuring it out as I go. Because the only other father figure I had, my dad's best friend, I ended up losing him young too. But you can't go through life using that as justification for why you hold on to things that maybe you shouldn't. But even if subconsciously this is all about my dad or whatever, which I don't even know, but hey, whatever, it's as good a theory as any, you know? But even with all the emotional considerations, I still have to face the fact that I'm at a point where I'm struggling to justify continuing to own Betty. And look, she still runs well mechanically. But the accumulation of little stressors have become a weight on my mind. I don't really have a whole lot of elbow room here, so I'm kind of driving like this, because if I try to drive like this, you know, I feel kind of like my elbow is just hitting that, like that. Yeah. It's like I'm telling them a joke and like kind of coaxing them into laughing. Yeah. Just like, here, hey, how about that?
It's like every drunk uncle who suddenly has a new definition of personal space.
Yeah. It's like, what did the miller's daughter say to her fiance when he tried to get her to run away with him? Cantaloupe. It's but then but yeah.
That was too good. That's just reminding me of just like old men whose personality is drink a lot and loud.
So also, okay, these gauges right here, the battery and the oil gauge, do not reflect actual oil and battery values at all. Never have. So
is it just like Ford's where it has like 3 positions on it, or are they just steady the entire time?
They come up to about here, even when I've gotten new batteries.
Hold on, gotta do camera. Look at get people you see and point at it.
Yeah, I just, so like this. As a matter of fact, oh, sorry. So they just kind of hang out there, always.
Okay, maybe they say something.
Maybe, but
I think like with the sensors, they have like 3 position, like nothing, okay, and uh-oh, and you're dead.
Yeah. It's the accumulation of tiny things, and that is really kind of bugging me. The rattles, or not rattles really, but the rumbles, you know, because every time I start this up, even when it starts up easy, it starts up hard almost, in that, you know, it's almost like there's a cylinder misfire, but there's not really a cylinder misfire. It's just sort of like...
Do you keep this seat this far forward all the time?
No. My mom was riding with it. She's super short. went to go visit my new niece, and I was bringing my mom home from the hospital, and so, and this car kind of makes her nervous because I think it doesn't do gradual acceleration. It just sort of starts going, and it feels almost kind of not jerky, but
that first gear is pretty low. I mean,
yeah.
They wanted even the V6 Mustang to feel like, hey, it's got a lot of pep. So you do that with a short gear ratio.
That's more or less what I have to say about the inside. I mean, interior-wise, it's never been a great interior, but
I mean, it's Ford.
it's Ford.
I mean, it's keeping with all Mustangs. I think it really wasn't until the S550 that the interiors started to become, you know, good. Even concourse level SN-95s, you just see
Like that.
like that.
Yeah.
Like they were never great, and yet they're fun to look at. Like from the outside, they still look like there's something here.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, these things were awesome. Then you get in them, and you're like, oh, this is a budget sports car.
Anytime it rains, like this gets all damp, like down
Uh-oh.
here. I mean, granted, it's completely bone dry now, but I mean, there's water getting in.
Well, that's the price you pay for pillarless doors.
pretty much.
You want a car with pillarless doors? You know,
That's
like
what's gonna
Subarus know that. These things seal, kind of.
Kind of.
I mean, it's nice in the summertime when you roll it down. Pillarless doors are really easy to get in and out. I like them on my Subaru.
Yeah.
You just had to understand that, okay, you're gonna have wind noise.
Yeah.
But it's gonna get damp on the inside. It's like owning a convertible.
Yeah, I gotta have volume cranked up all the way to hear anything
Yeah.
most times. No, okay, that's kind of an
I'm
oversimplification.
so spoiled in that. That is so quiet. Future Nick, bleep out my swearing.
I knew what I was getting into when I got a Mustang. I knew exactly the amount of room that I would have. But I guess at the time, I didn't really expect that I would ever have to take anyone anywhere, because I didn't think that I would ever be able to be okay and confident enough in my driving to have that responsibility, to be able to take people places and trust myself enough to get them there safely. Because, you know, my anxiety robbed me of a lot of self-confidence in my abilities as a human being. And so I just got, you know, this thinking I wasn't really going to have to take anyone anywhere. And what ended up happening was that over time, I would spend Fridays picking up my brother and my nephew and taking them grocery shopping, because that was sort of our guy time. And I loved that. I loved having guy time with them. But my brother would sit in the back seat, or my nephew would sit in the back seat, sorry. And he would have his groceries, and there would really be no room for him anywhere. And obviously that's going to be a problem when you're driving a muscle car, I guess. I mean, it's funny, like the build quality is all right, but by the same token, it's not great. Like all these things that have been compromised are all things that went pretty early in my ownership. I'm talking the sun visor fabric up there, and, you know, just little pieces of plastic here and there. Oh, the center console, like the cover for that came off almost immediately. The rear defrost wasn't really working, wasn't really attached. The head unit pretty much stopped working within a few months of my getting this car. And so I replaced it with an aftermarket JVC head unit. This thing does not want to stay clean no matter what I do to try to keep it that way. I vacuumed this over the weekend, and as you can see, it's already a mess. Now, granted, a lot of this is my mess, which is, you know, I have my OBD2 reader. I have no idea what this is. Oh, it's another piece that broke off that I was going to use as an example of a piece that broke off. But, I mean, stuff like this, like, why on earth do I have this car wash brochure? It's almost like a weird pack rat mentality, but I don't know that I'm doing it. You know, I don't know that I'm using all of these things for no reason. Let's see, like a wrapper for an alcohol wipe pad. My mom gave me a care package the other day, which is pretty great. These are, she just gave me hot apple cider, and wipes that she said they're for your ass, because she knows I get hemorrhoids sometimes, you know, and just like, here are ass wipes. So thank you, Mom. I wanted to own this car forever, but I can't justify it when there are months where student loans, medical expenses, all these other things need my attention that I can't afford to give to a car right now. And hey, I'm doing fine. I can pay all my bills. It's going to be okay. I just might not be able to get a car that's anything other than a hopefully reliable beater. And it's whatever, you know? My life is nobody's responsibility but mine. I made the choices that landed me here. I chose to go to college, to go to grad school, to buy a Mustang, to continue to sink money into that Mustang when other matters deserved my attention more. I let my life get away from me, and that's nobody else's fault but mine. But now I'm trying to take ownership and correct my shortcomings and make sure I can find a way to get to where I want to be in the future. Because I don't want to be a burden. I want to take care of myself, yes, but I also want to take care of the people I love. And I think moving on from Betty is an extension of that. I think life is about negotiation, negotiating different times in which we can be selfish and then allowing ourselves to be selfish. And doing so without guilt, but also recognizing when the time for selfishness has passed, that it doesn't serve the needs of the ones we care about or even necessarily ourselves. We have to negotiate those periods in our lives, the times we can center ourselves and the times when we probably shouldn't. And I don't want to constantly center myself, you know? To put myself at the middle of everything like I'm the main character, because I'm not. We have to negotiate those times. And I guess I've always had a hard time figuring out when those moments should be. Obviously, I love my job and getting to drive all the wonderful cars and weird cars that I have. And through all of my different mental health struggles, support from my loved ones has helped immensely. Support from you guys has helped immensely. It's all incredibly meaningful and touching. And yet, I don't want a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter or anything like that. There are people out there who could use that kind of help way more than me, and who deserve it way more, if I'm being honest. So I'm just going to try and save as best I can over the next few months, recognizing that there may be times where there will be more pressing matters than getting a different car. But I'm still going to work hard to make it happen, whether it's through the sale of Betty or my solo videos. A new episode of RCR Stories is coming out in a few weeks, so definitely look forward to that. It's going to be a long one. Or whether it's through the weekly RCR videos, the podcast, even something silly like my music. I want to do right by those of you who support us with your viewership. And I want to put that trust in myself to come through for myself. In the early days of RCR, when Brian's Echo was totaled and we literally could not afford another camera car and it seemed like RCR would end right then and there, you guys came through for us. RCR would not have continued without that support, and in a way, that felt like an investment in us. An investment in which I hope you feel you've seen a return. But my situation is different. The channel will be fine whether I get something or not. I mean, sure, it would be great if I could sell Betty for $5,000. That would be amazing. Or some other unrealistic figure that someone would just want to pay that for the chance to give her a better home than I ever could. Give her the works, make her like new or better. But I know that despite all the money I've put into her, and honestly, it's been a lot, she's probably not worth $1,500 if she's even worth the scrap. I mean, I don't know. I haven't had the car appraised or anything like that, but it's just a feeling, you know? God, this video is so whiny. I'm sorry, it's just a kink I'm trying to work out so I can have positive self-image at some point between now and when I have to wear orthotic shoes, but I promise I'm working on it. I promise. Mustang SN-95. The official car of high decibel curse words and low decibel affirmations. So I am in therapy, and my therapist told me that what she's recognizing is that I apparently don't feel I deserve things. And I think it's because when RCR took off, there was a lot of guilt, because there's no reason I should have success. I mean, yes, I've done the work. Yes, as a Puerto Rican kid, growing up without a father in one of the poorest cities in the country, I've done well. But the guilt is still there. I mean, even when it comes to being Latino, my imposter syndrome is still there because my Spanish is terrible. In so many ways in my life, in so many aspects, I feel like an interloper, especially in my job, because I had dreams, but I didn't think I would actually ever realize them. The only dream I had growing up was to be a writer, to pay the bills with the thoughts swimming around in my head. And then it happened, and I couldn't help feeling like one big fraud. Because I never thought in a million years that anyone would ever pay me to write or want to listen to it once I did. So the only way through was to replace the feelings of guilt with feelings of gratitude. Because even if I didn't feel like I deserved this life, it's not like I wasn't going to be grateful for it. There's a line I wrote for the SVT Lightning review to the effect of how there can always be more, so be thankful. But there could always be less, so be thankful. And that's what I want to be. I want to have gratitude in every aspect of my life so that when Betty goes, whenever that is, I'm grateful. I don't let the gnarled roots of bitterness and cynicism take hold. I can just move on to the next car, recognizing that I'm merely the temporary custodian for something that, yeah, meant a lot to me, but also was never meant to be mine forever in the first place. And I don't have to stand there with a woe is me attitude, waiting for the tow truck, wondering why this is happening to me again, as if the universe actually feels anything but a limitless indifference to our struggles. Maybe that understanding might have helped me, but then it feels like everything that could help us in life exists just on the perimeter of our understanding, hiding in the margins of what we can perceive when we need to perceive it. So I just went on living, driving a car that constantly stressed me out. And then the stress feeds the guilt. The notion that it isn't supposed to be you, Nick. It shouldn't be you. Yours isn't a name anybody should know. It's a cosmic mistake that anyone does know it. But just because they do know it, don't go thinking you're important. Because really, how many people even do know your name? And how many people that do even care? You're disposable, expendable, replaceable. This is who you are. A vessel to build resentment in others. A receptacle for failed aspirational longing. Just accept it. And then you can never be hurt by what's inevitable. That's what it's like in my head. That's what it has been like for years. Interrogating my own worth, you know? Because I never thought that I would get to a place where I was okay enough to be able to travel, you know? And not just domestically, but abroad as well. What did you do to earn this, Nick? You went to the UK, and you didn't deserve it. You went to New Zealand, and you didn't deserve it. You've met and hung out with all of these amazing people, these titans in the automotive community. The Smoking Tire, Gears and Gasoline, Throttle House, the Straight Pipes. You've met so many incredible people and had so many incredible experiences, and you didn't deserve them. That's what it's been like, catastrophizing, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And look, it's all stuff that I'm working on moving past. In therapy, I feel like I'm actually doing the work now, the real work, investigating the causes of my own self-deprecating mindset and getting to a point where I accept who I am, what I deserve, and what I can manage. But for now, I keep trying to earn it, to earn the life I have, to be deserving of it, all of it. I don't want a lot out of my life. I just want to have one, and the strength to live it. And I don't want a lot out of my replacement car either. I just want something I don't have to worry about constantly. But maybe if I'm honest with myself, what I really want is something I can love as much as I've loved this Mustang. To have something that feels this much like home, this much an extension of who and what I am. And hey, maybe Betty was never that. Maybe she was always just a Mustang, but she was my Mustang. And when she goes, it's something I'll always remember. I'll always remember how proud I felt to drive this Mustang and how happy it made me. Even after all the struggle, I can only wish that anybody else who ever owns a car, new or used, domestic or import, classic or clunker, has the capacity to feel the same way, to love as deeply, and to feel as thankful. Thank you, Betty. Even if I can't thank you for being a great car. Thank you for being my car.